The opinions and recommendations expressed by Dan are his own and do not necessarily represent the opinions of this station or any of the show's sponsors.
Welcome back, American Family Radio Network, Financial Issues, 866-300-9298. So what do you think? 2014, going to be good, going to be bad from an economic standpoint? Maybe from a political standpoint, but no. From an economic standpoint. And 2013, what do you think? Was it a good year? Was it a good year for you for some reason? Or what do you really think? And here's what I'd really like to hear, too. What have your observations been about the people around you, the people in your centers of influence? Okay, so the people that you hang with, are they optimistic about their current situation in this economy? Is their standard of living getting better, or is it getting worse? Are the friends that they have, is their standard of living getting better or worse? Staying the same? Stagnation? Whatever. Love to hear you weigh in on that. That'll be some interesting comments. So maybe give us a call, 866-300-9298. All the major indices in negative territory. The Dow's down 91 right now. So everything is negative. We're expecting a little bit more economic data. I'm interested to see the ISM number and the construction spending number is what I'm really interested in. Speaking of construction spending, as I was talking to Glenn, so Glenn, here's what I think. I would rather you wait. Let's wait for the end of the year. Let's get that house bought, get that 20% down, do it as quickly as you can. I don't think we're going to see a dramatic increase. Listen. If we see a dramatic increase, dramatic being something over 1% in the 30-year mortgage rates, if we see that between now and the end of next year, we're in big trouble in the economy, and it's probably better that you don't buy a house anyway. So, but I don't think we're going to see it. I really don't. I think that, and by the way, if the 30-year mortgage rates go up to 5%, I'm just throwing out a number, that's not too bad. I know to those of you who are young that since you have been watching mortgage rates, if you're, let's say, 25 or so, 28, and you've been watching mortgage rates just in the last 3 or 4 years, it seems like 5%. Oh, my word, that is... No, it is 5% is not that bad. I mean, it really isn't. I mean, it's respectable. It is reasonable for a 30-year mortgage. And maybe you reduce that by going 20-year. And don't let everybody discourage you. Don't be afraid to say, look, I want a 20-year or I want a 15-year. I don't want a 30. Well, we got to go FHA and they want to be 30. I remember back about 4 years ago when my son-in-law and daughter bought their house in North Carolina, they actually went to the settlement table and they wrote out their down payment so they could put almost nothing down. And, they had to walk away and say, look, no, you're going, I've got this money to put down. I'm putting it down. It's amazing how they want you to carry as much debt as possible, obviously. So don't do that. Hang in there. That getting rid of that PMI is huge. And I think when you said you've been hearing some differences of law changes, no, I think what you've been hearing, Glenn, as a matter of fact, I heard it again this morning, or I read something again this morning on it. I think what you're hearing is that mortgage companies continually and are looking to, in 2014, to get more lenient, getting away from the 20% requirement and starting to look at smaller down payments. Because we in America, we don't learn from our mistakes. That would be no fun. So we don't learn from our mistakes. We continue to make the same mistakes over and over again because it's what we do for some reason. So, all the troubles that they had, they're going to ignore it and start getting back to where they were. But that's probably what you're hearing. I think that's going to have little to do with first-time home buyers and their PMI issue. So I would avoid the PMI at all costs if you can do it. So thank you for that call. Great stuff. Let me go to Tim. Tim's calling us from Georgia. Hey, Tim. Good morning.
Dan, Good morning. You have the ability to talk about the history of how our finances as the world has come about.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm finding out on a daily basis is that our younger folks, our younger adults, do not understand how we got to the point we're here. And I'm going to go shortly back to President Lincoln, his fight with the bank, and then turn of the century, and then Roosevelt when we went off the gold standard, and then down to Kennedy when he did an executive order in June of '63 to disband the Federal Reserve, and it was supposed to be implemented in February of '64. He was trying to get our economy back on track.
Yes.
And then Nixon came along, and he went ahead with the silver certificates and done away with that. But you have the intellect and the ability to discuss this and share how the Federal Reserve, and it is a note.
Yes.
On your dollar bill, you read it. It says a federal note for legal tender.
Right.
We are no longer on a gold or silver standard.
Right.
We're on the economy of the world and the World Bank and the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has the best deal in the world. They take paper, print out money, and charge it interest to the government. And that's a good deal. Could you elaborate and talk to the younger folks about this, please?
Thank you, Tim. I will do that. And you know what, Tim? Feel free to call me and remind me to do that on a regular basis, because one thing that we need is, which I said this, I think I just said this week, Monday or Tuesday. I was saying how much I appreciate, one of the things that I love the most when I do my town hall meetings, whenever I speak. It's interesting. I'm watching an interesting dynamic. More and more young people attending my town hall meetings. So I'll get, thousands of people coming to town hall meetings, and I'm seeing more and more of them. And when I say younger, I'm talking in their 20s, the 20-something, 30-something. I can remember years ago where it was almost always 55 and older. We're seeing more and more young people taking an interest in the things of the economy and their own stewardship, which is great. It's very exciting to me, and I appreciate that so much because I love to be around those young people. I'm noticing in the investment side of things, when I speak at an investment conference or a leadership conference, I'm seeing more older people. And it's very, very interesting, which is bothering to me because I'd like to see more younger people, particularly in those leadership conferences, than I would people, and I don't mean old, I'm saying, 40s, mid 40s and older at those conferences. But I do need to speak about it more and more often. And, people understand, first of all, in 1913, when the Federal Reserve was implemented, it was implemented as a result to 1906 through 1909, some severe monetary issues. And it was determined that we needed a regulatory authority, an organization that would be a private organization that could monitor our monetary system and have authority to a certain extent over the monetary system. So enters in the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve was going to be the window. If you can look and picture a cashier's window, the Federal Reserve was the cashier's window by which all banks, if they were going to be government-approved banks, all banks would have to go to the Federal Reserve in order to borrow money from the Federal Reserve, pay interest to the Federal Reserve, in order to get that money into their particular banking institution so that they could lend it, in today's case, invest it, and do what they need to do from a banking standpoint and become a little less reliant upon deposits. Huge mistake, but nevertheless. But here's the thing about the 1913 Federal Reserve. Now, I believe they would, of course, deny this, but I believe the reason it's called the Federal Reserve is because I believe that the government at that time intentionally wanted the American people to have the illusion that this was a federal institution. So therefore, they called it the Federal Reserve. It's got nothing. It is not a federal institution. It's not a government institution. It's a private organization. The Federal Reserve was supposed to be, and it was, from about 1913 through late 50s, early 60s. The Federal Reserve was somewhat and pretty much accountable to, because it was supposed to be, to the Congress. And the Federal Reserve was required to give reports, to be questioned, and to be held accountable by the government, by the federal government, by the Congress. Well, as you may or may not know, politicians, our legislators, Capitol Hill, our federal government, they couldn't hold anybody accountable for anything. It's got to be the world's worst system when you're asking the government to hold anybody accountable. They're okay. They can implement laws. They don't do a good job regulating or having regulatory oversight on those laws, hence why we got into the problem 2008. In my opinion, it was a lack of regulatory oversight. It wasn't a matter of more regulation. That's a whole other story. But they can't hold anything accountable. And certainly from Richard Nixon on, totally lost the ability to hold the Federal Reserve accountable. The Federal Reserve has built up massive amounts of assets. Think about this. You're charging interest to the government, and you're charging interest to the lenders, to the banks, for the money, for the window being open and them withdrawing money. You're charging them interest. You have nothing to spend the interest on. It's a beautiful thing. You got to buy some paper for printing, ink, things like that. You have no overhead. You don't have any real expenses. This interest since 1913 has built and built up in the coffers of the Federal Reserve for a long, long time. Our Federal Reserve, like others, has a dual mandate. They have to control the monetary supply, and they have to control inflation. Huge mistake. That shouldn't be the case. They should have nothing to do. Employment and inflation. Employment and inflation. Should not. Employment should not be their mandate. Shouldn't be a mandate. That's just my opinion. A lot of people would disagree with me, but they have to worry about employment. They don't have to worry about employment. Just worry about doing your job, and let the free market economy worry about the employment. Because if the free market economy is flowing and running fine, you don't have to intervene. Either things are going to be bad and people are going to be unemployed, or things are going to be good and people are going to be getting hired and be employed. Now, I don't have enough time here because I have too many people on hold to continue to really get into great detail on the Federal Reserve. I would welcome all of you young people out there, your questions, but understand we have a fiat currency, as Tim had mentioned, the caller. We have a fiat currency. We have a currency that is based on the full faith and credit of the United States of America. When the S&P ratings agency decided to downgrade the United States government, it is the reason why President Obama last year, again, you only heard this if you listen to this program all the time, took its Gestapo-like tactics and started to sue the S&P for a bunch of bogus, trumped-up charges to send a message, like Gestapo agents would do, to send a message to all the rating agencies: don't ever dare think about doing this, because you see what's happening? You will spend every last dollar you have in courts trying to defend against a bunch of bogus, trumped up causes that we ended up initiating to begin with. So don't even go there. That's all that was. It was nothing more than that. And nobody covered it, because we don't have a news media today. If we did, if we had a news media of the 1960s, they would have been all over that. But we don't have one today. So nobody covered it, nobody talked about it, but that's exactly what happened. So because our currency is dependent upon the full faith and credit, if the full faith and credit in the United States of America begins to diminish, what do we do? So the question is, will we ever have a commodity-based system? I think we might, but I don't think it's going to be coming out of the Federal Reserve or the United States government. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know how. We're never going to be on strictly a gold standard, but we could have a commodity-based system of precious metals, even agricultural commodities. But remember when we had that, folks, when you printed $1, you had to have $1's worth of gold in reserves to back that up. No longer the case. Financial Issues, 866-300-9298. We're going to get right back to the phones after this news break.